Hello. For those of you that have been online a little bit early, you noticed I goofed up. I accidentally posted my Sunday sermon, I believe on Wednesday night. So, I didn't want people to be disappointed and think, well, we got nothing to watch Sunday. This is a different kind of Sunday sermon for me because usually when I do these extra recordings, I take it out of 1 John. This time I'm going to stick with Jonah because there's some interesting things we need to be thinking about relative to ourselves and what was taking place in Jonah. And in particular, the reason why I'm thinking about this right now is because Matthew and Chase just got back from their honeymoon. Pretty cool time. And, probably about half an hour into Matthew and Chase being back, I realized, okay, there's a change. And I was surprised at how rapidly this change had been able to occur. You need to understand a couple things about my family. We are aggressive talkers. That's politely putting it. We tend to play word games, and how quick you are in your response is important when we're playing these types of games. So, like I said, aggressive talker is probably the best way to put it. But in the time that Matthew was on his honeymoon, Matthew has changed. Matthew's no longer part of the pack, ready to attack when the opportunity presents itself to squeeze in a word edgewise. Instead, Matthew's politely waiting. And waiting for his turn or waiting for others to finish what they're saying so that he can listen to the next person. It was interesting how quick that change came about. Now, let's look at a couple things first with Jonah before we jump into the New Testament. Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 and following. Now the word of the Lord, let me try that again. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Then jumping to chapter 2 as it starts. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the fish's belly, and he said, I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered me. So in chapter 1, fleeing from God. In chapter 2, he's turned 180 degrees, and he's seeking God because he's seeking rescue. Then we have the start of chapter 3. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent. And Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. And then he cried out and said, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. So we have a change that occurs in Jonah. He's told, you go to Nineveh. You tell them what I'm telling you now about their destruction. Jonah runs away. Unfortunately for Jonah, that was the wrong thing to do. He ends up getting swallowed by a large fish and calls out to God to be rescued. When God rescues him, Jonah does what God asked him to do the first time. God reiterates the whole thing and says, I want you going to Nineveh, and this is what I want you to tell them. So, in that case, Jonah has a reason for the change that he does make. And it's not a huge change, actually, because we know in chapter 4, Jonah's still ticked off. He didn't want to go to Nineveh because he didn't want them to be rescued. And in chapter 4, well, we'll read the first part of that. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he became angry. So he prayed to the Lord and said, Lord, was not this what I said? Was not this what I said when I was still in my country? Therefore, I fled previously to Tarshish, For I know that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. So in a sense, no, Jonah did not change in his character. He changed as far as his actions, but Jonah was still the same man. Matthew changed in his actions, and in a sense, changed a little bit in his character. Because as I said, aggressive. Aggressive does talk to what your character is like. And to dial that back means a specific change is occurring. And the reason why it's occurring, he's married. And he'll even say it's because of Chase. And he was sort of surprised when I said, oh yeah, I've seen significant change. And he goes, what do you mean significant change? And I said, well, we'll get to it in a bit. And things go on, and finally the light bulb hits. Matthew goes, oh, you mean that I'm asking or saying, wait, you need to hear what Chase has to say. I said, yeah, that's it. And he gets a big smile on his face because he realized, yeah, you're right. I have changed that about myself. And in Matthew's case, Matthew had a real serious reason for making that change. He's married to Chase. He wants to be pleasing to Chase. It's significant to him that if Chase is talking, what she has to say is important. And the truth is, yeah, okay, we're a bit too aggressive. Being willing to hear others is a good thing. And Matthew's taking that next step. Jonah didn't take that next step. Jonah was resisting the change because deep down in his heart, he had no love for Nineveh. He did what God said because God told him, this is what I want you to do. And if you don't obey me, first time you got eaten by a big fish. Who knows what would happen if he didn't obey him a second time? Jonah was making a choice. He was obeying the letter of the law, but it only went so far. Once he did what he was supposed to do, he was back to being Jonah, really unchanged. Now, I'd like to look at a passage from the New Testament that at first glance sort of does and doesn't relate. We're going to go into how it really does relate after I've read it. Going to Hebrews chapter 1, starting with verse 5, it says, For to which of the angels did he ever say, You are my son, today I have begotten you? And again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. But when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, Let all the angels of God worship him. And to the angels he says, Who makes his angels spirits and his ministers a flame of fire? But to his son he says, Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You've loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions. And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. And they will all grow old like a garment. Like a cloak, you will fold them up, and they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will not fail. But to which of the angels has he ever said, Sit at my right hand, till I make your enemies your footstool? And they, not all ministering spirits, are they not all ministering spirits, sent forth to minister for those who have inherited salvation, or who will inherit salvation? Okay, the difference. The difference is God doesn't need to change. The part that's the same. There is a change that's talked about in this passage. The change that's talked about is the world. It's growing old. It'll pass away. It'll be taken off like a garment and set aside And right now there's some false doctrine going on related to that. New heaven and new earth. I brought it up before. We see in Hebrews that we're not going to remake the garment. God doesn't change what's there to keep it going. What is perishing. What is will not be. It will be taken off, set aside like an old garment. There will be a new heaven. There will be new earth. It's not going to be a remake of what already is there. It's something different. The thing that's not different and doesn't need to be different is God. God, from the beginning, before the laying of the foundation, had a plan. Before we sinned, before we would repent of our sin, God had a plan. God was ready to act in love from the beginning, knowing what our choices would be, knowing that for us to be able to get back into a right situation with God, it was going to take an act of God to bring that about. So, God's part is set. Because, one, okay, God is God. He doesn't need to change. Especially if he is the one who acts first. He acts in love. So that it's not dependent upon us, it's dependent upon him. He does that part. Then comes that change. What do we do because of what he's already done? And, all right, this is where it does really relate, both with Jonah and with Matthew. Jonah chose not to change for God. He changed his action, but he didn't change who he was. God was sending him. God had authority to send him. Jonah rebelled against God because Jonah didn't think God was acting right. Jonah thought those of Nineveh deserved what they were going to get. When Jonah gets in trouble for being disobedient to God, think about that one. Jonah wants to be rescued, like the Ninevites were rescued. Jonah wants for himself mercy and grace from God. But then, when God shows mercy and grace to those in Nineveh, Jonah's displeased. As I said, because Jonah didn't change in here. He changed an outward action, almost like taking this coat off and putting a different coat on. Does it change me? No, it doesn't. We need to realize that for ourselves, relative to our relationship with God, if the relationship with God has meaning, then the change needs to be something more than just a single outward action. It's more than going before a group of people and a minister and saying, I do. It's everything you do afterwards. And beginning immediately afterwards, Matthew began to change. Because what was important to Matthew was the commitment he made before God, before all those people present, before Chase, that he was going to put her first, or she was the first after God. He was putting her first in a way that meant more than just saying, I do, it's done. And putting her first, he's changed how he's communicating. In putting her first, there was an interesting discussion argument that took place. And on one hand, he agreed with his brother. Yes, what you said is probably right. And then Chase said what she had to think about it. And as soon as she finished, and Matthew says, and I agree with Chase. And everybody sort of laughed, except for Tyler and Chase. Both of them were pretty upset because Matthew seemed to have taken both sides. Matthew's not going to be arguing with Chase. It wasn't a critical issue. It didn't matter. So whether or not Chase is right or Tyler's right on something that doesn't matter at all, who cares? But being supportive of Chase because she is his wife, that does matter. And when it's something petty, you can say, I don't know the answer. But for now, I'm going to back Chase. Making the choice to do what is right in a relationship where you're committed sometimes means making changes. The same is true for our relationship with God. We can either be like Jonah and say, oh, yes, I believe in God, totally. Yes, yes. And I will follow God. Oh, yeah, that's me. I will do that. Will you do it? Will you do the things daily that are called for in becoming more a child of God? Because getting up tomorrow and being the same person you were today isn't becoming more a child of God. Getting up 3 days from now, a week from now, a month from now, and being the same person you are today is not becoming more a child of God. It's an act of intention. Okay, we want to talk about bad? Last year, I lost 30 pounds. I was very intentional about striving to lose that weight. This year so far, I have waffled up and down. I have lost 0. Why? I've not intentionally fought to lose the weight the same way I did last year. And if I don't make the intentional effort, it doesn't just accidentally occur. If we don't intentionally strive to be more Christ-like, it doesn't accidentally occur. Any more than getting a degree from college. Well, I'm in the program. Yes, but does that get you the degree? No. You have to make the effort to accomplish, to become something tomorrow that you aren't today. The same is true for being a Christian. We've got to be convicted about the relationship in such a way that we're not going to be like Jonah, that we're going to be like Christ. In choosing to be like Christ, we have to actively strive to be a different person. And I'd like to go ahead and close this with Hebrews chapter 2. Therefore, we must give the more earnest heed to the things we have heard, lest we drift away. For if the word spoken through angels proved steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord and was confirmed to us by those who heard him? God also bearing witness both with signs and wonders, with various miracles and gifts of the Holy Spirit, according to his own will. It's not a game. God himself invested in this truth, in sending his son, but not just in sending his son, with the miracles that spoke to say, this is the truth that he's spoken. I'm backing it. And allowing his son to die at Calvary, and raising his son on the third day to show he was superior to death, but also to show we too have the opportunity as joint heirs, as sons and daughters of God, to rise anew as his son did. But that only occurs when there's change in here, as opposed to just an I do and don't do.